And now, a Parliament special, the senior minister on his property purchases. The Prime Minister called for a debate on the purchase of properties by senior ministers and to have MPs discuss the issue. Senior Minister Lee, who is recovering from his angioplasty and stent operation several weeks ago, said he was unable to meet the press expectations. He felt the statements that he had issued were not satisfactory and wanted to get through to the people in person.
Let me state the circumstances. I, or rather my wife, came to buy 1 unit each in Nassim Jade and Scots 28, developed by HPL. In April 1995, my brother, Dr. Lee Swan Yew, rang up my wife. She was out. She returned a call. My brother's wife, Mrs. Pamela Lee, took the call and told her about a small development called Nassim Jade in Nassim Road. Now, my wife had wanted to buy a property for some time, and she had been to see some bungalows, 3 bungalows that were on the market, but did not like them. So she decided to consider an apartment. She visited HPL's office with Mrs. Pamela Lee and chose a flat next to my brother's, relying on Pamela Lee's judgment that she would have chosen a good aspect or a good prospect. Mr. Teo Gim Hock of HPL, in the presence of Mrs. Pamela Lee, quoted her a lump sum price, saying it was a discounted price. Didn't mention any discount percentages or the undiscounted price. My wife knew that discounts meant little because developers regularly give discounts on their listed prices. Having acted as a lawyer for developers, she knew the way they marketed, and their practice was to quote a high listed price and give discounts, which they vary according to the buyers and whether the market was going up or down. For a developer to have to lower the listed price because of poor sales would have made his earlier buyers feel cheated. Therefore, she focused on the actual price, as she always does. She agreed to it without bargaining, assuming that it was more or less what my brother, Dr. Lee, has paid for it in the adjacent flat. Because when the price was quoted, Mrs. Pamela Lee was with her, so she assumed that she would not give a price which would be fantastically above Mrs. Pamela Lee's. My wife was also confident that Mrs. Pamela Lee would have investigated condominium prices in that area and found it reasonable. She knew also that the wife of Mr. Tan Kok Kwan, and a lawyer in D&D, where she was a partner, had bought and was living in one of the flats in HPL's Four Seasons Park, and she had heard good reports of its workmanship and finishes. And this report of good workmanship and good finishes was confirmed by one of the other friends who had bought a flat in Four Seasons Park. Pamela Lee had chosen a flat on the 2nd floor level. My wife chose the adjoining flat on the same floor. She had in mind, I'm saying this because I've had a discussion with several older members of the PAP, because my natural instinct is to come out and say, I'll take you on the argument, but Mr. Dhanabalan told me, it's better to let people know why you actually bought it. So I asked my wife, better tell people why we actually bought it. She had in mind our possible future need for a flat after seeing what has happened to my father when he could no longer cope with the stairs and the steps in my old-style three-level home, bungalow home in Oxley Road, where my bedroom and sitting room is at one level, my dining room and my father's bedroom was at another level, and the kitchen is at a third level. And he had suffered fractures on his arms and legs in the last 4 to 1.5 years, and he repeatedly fell. So he had to move, most unhappily, to my brother's home of Lee Swan Yew, where he had a bedroom, a toilet, the dining room, and the sitting room, all on the same level, and he has not fallen. Later, of course, this is a distant future consideration, assuming that I reach 93, which is my father's age. Later, she told me she had booked a flat in my name because I did not have a property in my name alone, and that this would enable us to arrange our assets to benefit from the tax laws. I know some MPs feel unhappy when I showed them my draft. They say, that's very bad, that's tax evasion. Not at all. It is the business of lawyers and accountants to advise their clients on how to deploy their assets in a way that takes the best use or makes the maximum use of the tax laws. The properties she had bought previously were in her name and some were in our joint names. So I agreed. And that was the first time I knew I was buying, I don't even know the number, but I was buying some properties in Nassim Jade. Later, HPL sent a form addressed to me at Oxley Road. I never saw it. My wife took it, handed it to a lawyer, Ms. Kwa Kim Lee of Lee & Lee, to attend to. When the contract was signed, Lee & Lee lodged a caveat in the Registry of Titles, and the purchase price and my name as purchaser was on that caveat. My wife had no further dealings with HPL, and all correspondence between Lee & Lee were with HPL's solicitors. Now, unlike Nassim Jade, where she had in mind the distant possibility of our living in it one day, Scott's 28 was bought simply for investment, to let out. So she agreed to buy a level 28th floor, popular with foreigners. There was no mention of any discount, and indeed Ms. Kwa Kim Lee was not aware of any discount, as DPM has read from the letter by Ms. Kwa Kim Lee. She only learned of the 5% discount in April this year, after DPM asked her to inquire from HPL. My wife decided to buy this unit in our joint names, so that the option and the agreement were in our joint names. And Lee & Lee lodged the usual caveat in the land registry, our joint names, and the price. Now, at no stage did my wife or I feel that we were doing anything irregular or improper. They were open above-board transactions. Caveats were openly lodged by our solicitors to give notice to everyone. Not all buyers do that. Some buyers do not like their identities to be known and so do not lodge caveats, preferring to run the risk of not protecting the property from a subsequent sale to some other person. Now, these caveats gave my name as purchaser for Nassim Jade at the price of $3.578260 million. And for Scott's 28 at the price of $2.791500. If my wife or I had thought that there was anything improper in buying the properties because my brother was a non-executive director of HPL, she would not have proceeded with the business. She expected all legal procedures and permissions to be obtained as a matter of course.
Mr. Lee then went on to say that on the feedback he received, nobody doubted the legality of the purchases. Rather, it was a question of fairness.
People outside say that you have the inside track. My son has the inside track. Ministers have the inside track. Permsecs, MPs have the inside track. And you get invited to soft launches. They queue outside. And sometimes pay hundreds of dollars to get someone to queue for them, or sell their place in the queue for hundreds of dollars. Let me explain from my point of view the problem of the inside track. The sense of fairness or equality. It is the government's duty to have a level playing field. When the government sells land for development, it's an open tender system. When the government sells houses, HDB, HUDC, individual bungalows, or groups of houses for redevelopment, is by tender, open tender. We are the government. Not all governments do that, but the Singapore government wisely does that and has benefited from it. It has built confidence amongst all investors, locals and foreigners. But let me add that private property is not sold by the government. The government is going into executive condominiums. That will have to be a level playing field. But private corporations, private companies, private businessmen, they conduct their business to get the maximum advantage, the maximum profits. Hence, if you can get your product, whether a tennis racket or a golf stick or a cap or jogging shoes or running shoes, worn by, used and seen on television at the Olympics or at the US Open or Wimbledon, then thousands of others buy them. It's unfair. Totally unfair. The number 2 who gets beaten at Wimbledon gets a very small fraction of the number 1. So they sweat their guts out to be number 1. Sports and TV stars are valuable not because the sports maker thinks well of the sportsman. He wants to sell his product. And having it used by a star well known throughout the world adds value to the product. Now, sellers want customers who are celebrities, or otherwise, depending on the product, well-known and admired public people. So you see, Mr. Cham had to sue a restaurant because they said he ate at that restaurant. I don't know whether the food was good or bad, but Mr. Cham objected strenuously. He is not unknown. I'm sure if he were unknown, the judge would have given him a pittance. But he is Cham Si Tong with a record of many years in public life. Let me illustrate in my own very small way. My being me helped me get, if you like, the inside track and special treatment. I was diagnosed on the 10th of May after my stress test as having my coronary artery reblocked after 8 weeks. No, sorry, March. I could see my cardiologist's face, Dr. Arthur Tan. He was glum. His reputation was at stake. What to do? I had 2 other cardiologists, which I've carefully chosen after going through all the cardiologists. Lau Lipin, former head of NUH cardiology, Morris Chu, also head of cardiology, NUH. But they did not do that angioplasty. They were just advising, so they were less in danger of their reputation. They said, "Can you excuse us?" I thought, oh dear, this is trouble. So they went out. 10 minutes or 15 minutes later, it seemed quite a long time to me. They came back. They said the options were do another angioplasty. I said, what's the chance? This is again the same problem. 30 to 40% chance it will re-stenose. But it might not re-stenose. Or we put a stent in. And they explained it to me. I said, well, what? Of course it's a higher risk. And the blood may clot along the stent, and some people get shocked, and so on. Arthur Tan says, brother, I've done the best I could the first time. So I cannot do better than the first time. So I said, all right, we'll have to consider a stent. Then Lau Lipin said, there's a stent specialist who's coming to have a seminar tomorrow. A Dr. Richard Schatz. This was Saturday. Sunday, Dr. Richard Schatz was coming to have a seminar at the Raffles Hotel. He is a man who invented one of the stents used called a Palmer-Schatz stent. Maybe we persuade him to do you. He has done thousands. Arthur Tan had done a few hundred, 120. Lau Lipin has done 100 and something. smallest shoe has done 100 and something. So I said, all right, we try. Arthur Stan waited for him at the airport to arrive at 12 midnight. He came, explained to him what happened first time, showed him the film. Will you stay and do my patient? He said, I have a full schedule. But if you like, when we finish the seminar early, at 12, I'll have lunch, then we'll have it done at 2 o'clock. They take 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So he rang me up. By this time it's about 1:30 in the morning. He came to see me at my home. I was waiting. I was wide awake, waiting to know what was going to happen. And I was shocked when I saw him because he was haggard. I said, what's happening to you, Arthur? He said, well, I've been running around since we did the test, trying to get this operating theater ready, all the anesthetists, standby surgeons. So I said, look, have a glass of water first. Yeah, I heard him. I said, if you were me and you were having this operation, would you go on that table at 2 o'clock and be operated upon by a man who's arrived from California, 9 hours time difference, or 15 hours time difference, going to have a conference seminar next morning, finish the seminar and come in to do me? He took a deep breath. He said, no, I will have elective procedure. I said, yes, so would I. You tell him, thank you very much. If he would come back when things are normal and we have no rush around surgeons and standby anesthetists on a Sunday afternoon, then we'll do it. Otherwise, we proceed with what we have here. But my cardiologists were also experienced handlers of, well, I wouldn't say handlers, experienced men of the world. Between the time he left Dr. Schatz at 1:15 to see me at 1:30 a.m. in the morning, they decided to get the owners of the stent who had arranged for this seminar, Johnson & Johnson. And they said to him, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew would be using one of your stents if Mr. Schatz were able to come back. Mr. Schatz may not know the commercial considerations, but the Johnson & Johnson representative in Singapore saw the point of having a stent put in the coronary artery of someone who is well known, liked by some, disliked intensely by others. But whatever it is, well known, and not just in Singapore. So in those few hours, messages or faxes to and fro. By the next morning, it was agreed that Dr. Schatz would come back on Friday, the 15th of March, after he had finished all his operations, and do me in the afternoon. Is it fair? You can be the top executive. You would not have come back. You would have to go to San Diego, and you would have to find a slot. But I am me, after 44 years of public life since my first postman strike in 1952. And there was some added value to this stent if I've got one in my coronary artery and it's alive. It's not a level playing field. When I went to Williamsburg this time to meet the top 100 American CEOs at a conference of the U.S. Business Council, it so happened that at dinner I sat next to a Mrs. Larson and my wife sat next to a Mr. Larson. And he is the Chief Executive Officer of Johnson & Johnson. And he was very pleased that I was healthy. And I was very pleased that his stent had helped me stay healthy.
Mr. Lee said this is the way business is done.
It's a fact of life. There is no way of me having to join a queue to buy a house or my wife. All I need do, which I have not done, is to tell my secretary to ring up Mr. Ng Teng Fong or Kwek Ling Ju, whom I see for business reasons, not my business, government business, their enterprises overseas. And I say, I like that development. Even if all the units were sold, they will find one unit for me, surely. And they will compensate that man with a special price in the next best building that they put up. Or Mr. Ng Teng Fong wouldn't be Mr. Ng Teng Fong. So too, Mr. Ong Beng Sing, let's grow up. I am what I am, and I'm here after 37 years in office because I've never taken advantage financially of my position. And for $416,000 or $17,000 to go and do something which was improper. Let me take this out into the open because people will say, look, by God, the Lees buy properties worth 3.7, 2.7, 3.8, 3.5 without batting an eyelid. And we give up discounts worth 400,000, GPM 700,000 without batting an eyelid. I'm not sure whether GPM can do it without batting an eyelid. It's going to hurt him. And I've told him, if it's too painful, let me know. But I can do it without batting an eyelid because my wife can do it without batting an eyelid. In the course of the last 40 years, she had bought other properties. Most in her name, some in our joint names. And between 69 and 74, she bought 3 in the names of our 3 children as gifts to help them set up homes later. She often bought at discounts when they were her clients, which was completely normal practice. I have absolute trust and confidence in her integrity and judgment. And for more than 40 years, she has managed her law practice and her assets having dealt with property developers. She knows that if you are a successful property developer, you have to be shrewd, hard-headed, and sharp. She has seen them. So she expects, whether it's Ng Ding Fong, Kwek Hong Peng, or Ong Beng Seng, to be shrewd, hard-headed, and sharp. She did not buy because my brother was the director of the company. She never thought of that point. It's irrelevant. If she wanted to buy, Ong Beng Seng will sell. It's as simple as that. Doesn't depend on my brother. But my brother made it easy for her because the wife had chosen one flat, and she says, okay, rather than, my wife is over 70 years old and doesn't go around wanting to grow richer and looking at 39 units to see which is the best outlook and which is the best price. Says, all right, you've chosen this one, I choose the next best one next to you. Every developer in town knows her by her maiden name under which she practices. And they are most likely to offer her the price they give to their best customers. Whether it is soft launch, hard launch, or after all sales have been made. She did not bargain because she knew that HPL would oblige. She asked for another 5% discount. Mr. Teo would be a little nervous because he has no authority. He'll ring up Mr. Ong Beng Seng and he says, 5%? Make it 6, he said. Why not? He's got Mrs. Lee Kuan Yew as his customer, and better still, out of the blue, she said, put it in the name of Lee Kuan Yew. There was nothing underhand in this.
Mr. Lee says he has nothing to hide. He can have a commission of inquiry, a CPIB or CAD investigation.
At the end of it, the facts must be here. I make no secret. From time to time you can look up Hansard. I've told this House that in the last 30 years that my wife earns many times more than I did. And that's the reason why I was able to carry on as Prime Minister on the paltry salaries that I earn. She has been one of the most experienced conveyancers and top earners. Top earners. They are all with inland revenue. In the legal profession, at that time, 60s, 70s, 80s, she was a top earner. She has enough to help our 3 children, including our 2 married sons, to own their own homes and to buy other properties. Our children are also joint shareholders of KGC or Kwok Yok Chu Private Limited, her own private holding company. 40 years I've just concentrated on my job. And there's a lot to concentrate about. And if you concentrate your mind on the future of Singapore, you will know that beyond 20 years, 10 years, yes, it's clear, assuming no war. 20 years, fair. 30 years, I will not vouchsafe that we will be like this. It is not possible. Will there be a stable balance of power which enables a city-state to survive? Will there be an international order, the UN, multilateral security arrangements, that enables a little island with no depth for any defense and must be able to respond immediately or perish. To survive, DPM came back, my son came back from Tokyo. On Saturday, he came for lunch. On Sunday, I asked him, how did it go? So it's good, but at lunch they asked me some searching questions. Kid Andren. I said, what were they? Says one asked him, Singapore is a wonderful place, so successful, so clean, so orderly, so advanced, so alert. But you know, city-states disappear. What will happen? So I asked him, what did you tell him? He said, I paraphrase what you said in Australia some years ago when I was in Sydney, and I said 100 years from now, there will be Australia with cows and sheep and men, maybe more avos. But 100 years from now, the island of Singapore may be here. Who is in charge of that island and what has happened to it? So, to these young people who extrapolate on the basis that what we have succeeded in doing will go on forever, I say, stop and think again. It is not as simple as that. My wife and I are over-invested in properties. For our lifetime, I think that's sound. I'm not sure it's sound for my children's lifetime. As GIC, Government Investment Corporation, we have studied the investment patterns of all the big funds throughout the world. No fund puts in more than 10% into properties anywhere in the world, whether into New York or North America generally, or Europe or Japan. It's the most illiquid, the most prone to political and government changes. So, I have encouraged Singaporeans to own properties. I still do, because I believe it commits them. Having bought your property at $400,000 HDB, or resale $700,000, $100,000 HDB, or resale $700,000, are you going at the next elections or wherever to go and take a serious risk and put in a government that cannot look after this place and see your prices plummet? I'm in favor of it, but I say to the young, beyond 20 years, please, I think at the end of 10 years, if I'm around, I might give you another forecast. I need only add that the rules of prudence that we inherited from the British and updated from time to time have worked. Because since 1959, I set out to establish high standards of integrity in elected and public officials. Ministers have always been allowed to buy properties, with or without discounts, soft options, or soft sales, or official sales. And they need not have any permission from me. because there was none of this frenzy to buy. But they never used ministerial influence to gain any advantage. My method was really the British method. No special rules to say you do this, you don't do this. These are the guidelines, rules of prudence. You are on your honor as an officer. In the old system, the Prime Minister was the only person above the law. I was the only person. In other words, if I lowered standards, that is the end. Because my secretary must know, my PA must know, and they're going to do something silly too themselves. I mean, by the time the Prime Minister does this, I better put something by for myself. So when we had this elected president, I suggested, PM, why don't you protect yourself? And have it written to the Constitution that if you refuse permission to investigate, Director CPIB can see the President and he can say investigate. Because he's a different person today. And I think many people now know that since he became President, he has taken a completely different position from the government. So there has been cases to be adjudicated whether we can or not make certain amendments. But that is in the nature of human beings and of institutions. Once you change the rules, the person who takes over must exercise his responsibility. My most important and precious contribution to Singapore has been its financial integrity, the cleanliness with which I have established a government, the cleanliness in public life and generally in society. Our problem now is we are going regional in a big way. So I have had ministers tell me, better don't meet these people. I've never met these people before. But to go regional, I've met Ng Teng Fong, I've met the Kwek brothers, Kwek Leng Ju, I've met Ong Beng Seng. Mrs. Aileen Wong is very worried. She told my brother, Dr. Lee Swan Yu, who told me recently, she said, oh, it's very dangerous, no? Giving these people face and stature in Singapore, my being seen with them. But there is no way. How can I help them go regional into China or Vietnam unless I know how do you operate, what are your problems, what can I do to clear these roadblocks? I have met them privately in my office to discuss these problems. Now, if we, in going regional, and we have to play by the rules there, bring those practices back here, then I say we become a different place. We have lost that premium. I think we need not. I can eat with Ong Beng Seng, and Ko Beng Seng, and I will still be the same person. No difference. And that is, again, back to character and a code of honor. It's a very important factor, this code of honor. I believe the way we handle this will become a plus to the system. No government in this part of the world will open willingly, when it need not open, a problem like this and take it out. Whether a commission of inquiry, debate in Parliament, select committee, or even a prosecution if a case could be made out. But by being able to do so, we have proved something, that a second generation in charge is able to maintain the same standards. If I did it, they'll say, well, when he's gone, the whole thing will be finished. But I think the Prime Minister has shown that although it was me that he had to investigate and DPM, he was prepared to do so. I think the English educated sometimes see it too much in a two-dimensional way. Ya Zhou Zhou Gan, the Chinese edition of Asia Week, had the right perspective. They compared the way houses were bought in 3 places and the way it was handled. They had a caption called 房事考验政治家. 房事 means double entendre. You know, 房事 means something secret going on, an illicit liaison in a bedroom. In this case, it means housing purchases. 考验政治, testing politicians. Li Guangyao, Chen Fan Anson, that's Anson Chen. Li Denghui, the 房事都备受考验. And the difference is stark. In the other 2 cases, no investigation, no comment. In Singapore, you have the facts. I have spent a lifetime against the odds, and they were very heavy odds, in building up confidence in Singapore. Confidence of Singaporeans in their future and confidence of foreigners who will invest their fortunes in Singapore. I will not do anything to undermine the government, its system, or the men and women who are in charge of it. The proudest thing I have is that there is a Singapore. My wife tells me sometimes, why do you do these things? They are watching the way they watch this, they are just ungrateful. Forget it. The proudest thing she is of are her 3 children. Upright, well-behaved, honorable. I don't think my son was brought up to take a little grease. And if Singaporeans believe that he is lesser than his father, then Singaporeans are in for a very foolish mistake. They were brought up straight. They're likely to stay straight. This, like, as I've said, a code of honor. If you break that code, you have brought shame upon the unit. You have brought shame upon yourself and your family. And for PAP MPs, I say, you have a proud tradition. Every one of you, if ever you buy a house in this question, must be prepared to come here and face it, like I have. Thank you.
More than a dozen MPs rose to speak, including members of the opposition. All shared the view that there was no moral or legal wrongdoing. there was no doubt as to the honesty and integrity of the senior minister and Deputy Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong.
Now, I think most people in Singapore, I should say most thinking people, and people are in the know, I think as a newspaper editor mentioned, there's no question of legality or improper behavior by the two ministers. I think the problem, as I can see it, probably relates to the income of ministers. I think these two are tied together. People perceive that our ministers now are the best paid in the world for such a little island and comparable to the majority of wage earners in Singapore. Ministers are earning the type of salary from public funds which is way beyond their imagination. I think many people perceive that. I think this is one of the problems.
No, do you believe that I have bought these properties with my salary? That I could have bought 3.7 million plus 2.8 million with my salary, which is about $1 million plus. Could I have bought it? And my wife has bought it without mortgage.
Well, I really don't know. I mean,
no, I'm telling you. This, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I'm stating a fact.
On the following day, Wednesday, another opposition member, Ling Hao Dung, told the House he did not take part in the debate earlier because he felt there was no wrongdoing on the part of the two ministers.
I think the problem started because you have decided to return the money, which you don't have to, if it is proper. Because the whole thing was, you know, the money you receive is proper, Proper. It was proper. That is why I said you should not have returned the money to the, decide to give the money to this one.
Can I ask you, when was the point of time when you came to that conclusion?
In fact, when I heard the news that, from very outset, when I heard the news that, the purchase of the property, and then both you and the deputy intend to return money, I thought, what's the necessity? It's not at that time, I really said that there's no necessity to return the money.
I understood you that from the moment DPM and I announced that we had bought these properties at the discounts we stated, you were convinced it was right and proper. On what basis did you come to the conclusion?
John, I'm a practicing lawyer, and it is a common practice that discounts are given. Discounts are given. I mean, not only in the purchase of property, in fact, in many other transactions, discounts are given. In fact, sometimes the discount is not necessarily reflective of the discount they give to you. They can check up the price and then say, I give you a discount sort of thing. They check up the price and they say, I give you a discount. In fact, actually, you have no discount at all.
Doubted our integrity and honesty in the transaction?
No.
Thank you.
No. But I want to make it very clear. I said this not because the senior minister is here and not because the deputy prime minister is here, because yesterday, in fact, I told Dr. Tan Teng Bok, I told him, I said, I'm not taking part in this debate. He asked me why. I said, there is no impropriety. In fact, you can vouch. I told him this. I said, in actual fact, there is absolutely no necessity to have this matter brought before Parliament.
But may I, in conclusion, may I therefore conclude that when Dr. Chi Soon Chuan issued a statement demanding a public inquiry and investigations into the ministers and so on, he was not speaking on behalf of you as the leader of the party.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, sir, the statement was issued, you'll notice, no mention of you nor the Deputy Prime Minister. The statement was issued because of escalating of the prices going up. And also partly, we think, if this thing, if you have a commission of inquiry, you'll be able to settle once and for all. To say, well, what are the discounts given to any minister or any impropriety? I think it will come in that.
But you have just, the member has just said that he was absolutely convinced there was no impropriety, and yet Dr. Chisholm Chuan suggested a commission of inquiry on a general fishing exploration.
No, I think it's a question of the perception of members of the public. Let me put it this way. People were asking, were special favor granted? I met a lot of people there during the Meet the People session and in the coffee shop. They were asking, were special given to the senior minister or to the Deputy Prime Minister? So the statement by the SDP for this is not so much as a sort of to clear up whatever perception maybe members of the public. I mean, if we have a commission of inquiry, it clearly stated that it's a normal procedure, and then so the fact that this is brought before Parliament.
Had there been a commission of inquiry, you would have testified at the commission that as a practicing lawyer, you, Ling Hao Dong, know that this is normal property developers practice.
Definitely.
You would have been a witness to that commission.
Definitely.
Thank you.
And
I have nothing further to add.
No, as I said, lest I repeat myself, whatever debate given shouldn't be returned, and secondly, we should not debate this in Parliament.
On the final day of the debate, the Prime Minister said he was satisfied with the outcome. It has reaffirmed his conclusion that there was no impropriety involved in the property purchases.
I'm satisfied with the outcome of the debate in the House. It reaffirmed my conclusion that there was no impropriety in SM's and DPM's purchases of units in SMGH and Scots 28. There is no reason why a senior minister who has dedicated his life to the country should want to sully his reputation in semi-retirement. Nor is there any reason why DPM Lee should risk tarnishing his.